Hey everybody, today I got a 2-for-1 for you because I had something that was a rarity for me. I was able to finish 2 books over the course of this last week. That being said, I have a little disclaimer. I did not read both books from beginning to end over the course of last week. I'd already started on one and got it finished, but then the second one I power read through it, which is great because I don't get to do that as much as I would like anymore. So the 2 books that I'm going to talk about today are Camp Damascus from Chuck Tingle and Cycle of the Werewolf by Stephen King. Camp Damascus is about a teenage girl who is raised in a very fundamentalist Christian family that is run by this particular religious sect, and she soon discovers that her family, her community, and the camp that she has been both supporting and going to, Camp Damascus, has a terrible secret. And for those of you who like Chuck Tingle, you know that he writes cryptid erotica and he is a fervent supporter of LGBTQ rights. And this book focuses heavily on that theme in terms of LGBTQ plus themes and advocacy. And so you will not be disappointed in terms of characters who are very well fleshed out. The protagonist is very, very well fleshed out, very has a lot of depth to her, and is someone who you grow to get to know very, very well over the course of the book. Also, Chuck likes to write very introspectively, and so the character Rose has a ton of introspection based upon that you do nothing but hear about her thoughts about certain things, and the book does a lot of telling, does a lot of deep reflection, and that's both what I found to be a great thing because you learn a lot about Rose and her struggles as well as the process she's going through the entire step of the way. But also, it can kind of get a bit too introspective, so it's more like she's philosophizing, and you never see a lot of action that happens sometimes in between certain scenes. It's just a lot of thought. And don't get me wrong, I am very fascinated by how Chuck was able to use that in a way that you get to know the character a lot better. However, sometimes it sacrifices a little bit of the action. So it was something that I got used to, but I think I would have preferred a little bit more of the showing sometimes. Overall, though, Chuck Tingle balances horror, suspense, with a very clear message around social advocacy, and I would recommend it overall. I would say if I were to put it on a scale of 1 to 10, it's clearly an 8. And so my second book that I'm going to talk about is Cycle of the Werewolf by Stephen King. There is a lot of action and movement in this book. Stephen King is a master of horror. I don't think I really need to go into who he is because he's quite the horror icon at this point. But this book is something that is short. It's kind of the length of a novella. But there's a lot of action that goes through it. So one of the main characters is the werewolf, obviously. And the book spans a lot of dates and times and seasons because it shows like a cycle of violence that the werewolf commits upon the townspeople. And it is interesting seeing these little vignettes, how do I pronounce that? Vignettes, and around the werewolf and the people he encounters and brutalizes and kills. And then the story settles into something where you get a protagonist named Marty, who is a boy who has a disability. He is paralyzed below the waist, I believe, and uses a wheelchair to get around. And he becomes one of the main forces for standing up to the werewolf. And eventually, the werewolf is defeated, and it's something where you kind of go, okay, where is this going? Because in the beginning of the book, it's a lot of just plain old violence. And then the story starts to coalesce during the second, I'd say, half of the book, and culminates in a showdown. Uh, and I wasn't sure how I would like it because to me it seemed a bit disorderly. But I do like the idea of seasons, going through the seasons and the cycle of violence, and then ending. So I did like that part. Other times I was kind of like, okay, is there a purpose to this? But in the end, I think it wrapped up nicely. I think that Stephen King writes very uh, uh, emotive and scenes with a lot of tension very well. Like he's just the king at it, pun intended. So I'm going to give Cycle of the Werewolf an 8 out of 10, and I would recommend both books that I've talked about today that you go take a read. Okay, I that's it for me today, and I hope you are going to have a great rest of your night and great rest of your week, and that you spend some of it with a good book. Bye bye.